everyone, and welcome to another episode of Mindset Over Matter. I'm your host, Gabby Gooding, and today I am so very pleased to have Mayda Poc as our guest on the show. Mayda has a fascinating story that I wouldn't dare share on her behalf, but I will say that she is an ex-investment banker and self-identified workaholic, me too, turned career coach who has become passionate about helping executives find their purpose and fulfillment in their lives. She has overcome incredible life challenges along the way and is a perfect example of taking the lemons that life gave her and turning it into lemonade, not only for herself to enjoy, but everyone else that she interacts with as well. So, Mayda, thank you so much for joining. I'm so grateful that you've taken the time to join. Welcome.
And thank you for inviting me. And I love talking about lemons and lemonades and apple and tarts, lemon pies. Lemon pies, they're quite good. Yes, I like the analogy. I know it's a bit cliche, but I really like it.
It is cliche, but it always makes everyone smile. So why not?
Yes, I'll go for it. It's like it reminds us of our childhood when we used to sell lemonade or make lemonades and grandmas. I think it's perfect. I think it's perfect.
Yeah, for the entrepreneurial spirit in all of us, right? It's the lemonade stand that started it all.
Exactly. So lemons are not that bad fun at the end of the day.
That's right. That's right. They're revenue generators, so it's good. Yeah. So to start us off, I would love it if you could share a bit of your story, just in your own words, because you tell it best, and tell us how it is that you ended up doing the incredible work that you're doing today.
Yes. So story is, I'll fast forward a bit and go to my life as an investment banker. And 16 years in investment banking. I was in Paris. I started in Paris. Then in London, then in New York. It's fascinating. It's a very pleasing identity. It's very fast and furious. It's very useful. You do a lot of stuff. You meet people. It's very crazy. And then comes the time where, or at least for me, came a time where I had this kind of like midlife crisis, like a lot of midlife crises, very regularly, as in like, am I really where I'm supposed to be? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? I don't feel happy. I'm not unhappy either. It's one of those states that feel very iffy in a way because you're very stuck, but there's no movement. And luckily for me, movement came with cancer, actually. So I had advanced cancer because for 2 years, I decided to ignore that I wasn't feeling well. And then when I started thinking that maybe it's not normal not to be able to breathe, actually, diagnosis took its sweet time, and by the time I was finally diagnosed the right thing, which was advanced Hodgkin's lymphoma, it was quite late in the process. But as a workaholic, what do you do when these things happen? Well, I did what I typically did. I got very pissed because I was doing a big transaction and I had a senior role, and really, I don't have time to deal with that. I'm not going to deal with that. So reluctantly, I did deal with it. And obviously, it was a very good lesson as well, because it was for different reasons. Number one, because please, people, don't ignore when your body is not feeling well. Don't ignore that. Your body knows better than you, much better. So number one, don't ignore. Number two, don't only listen to the first doctor or the second doctor who tells you something is wrong, because sometimes they have very good points, but when you feel that I don't have asthma, it's not asthma, then continue the search. At that point, I abandoned the search. I was like, okay, fine, I have asthma. It's fine. So number two, don't do that. And number three, it's good as well to find a way where you don't need these kind of crises to actually do something about yourself, about your life, and to start questioning what is going on and why do you have this nagging feeling inside. And sometimes the nagging feeling, well, for me, I identify it as being my job. In reality, in hindsight, maybe it wasn't the job, maybe it was me actually. But this is really open for interpretation, and it's very individual to each of us.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that story. And on one hand, I'm very sorry, of course, to hear that happened to you. But at the same time, I really admire that you're trying to share what you've learned from that, because I think, cancer aside, I think a lot of the things that you said are very relatable, right? For instance, when you're not feeling well and the first thing that you think to yourself is, well, I don't have time for this, right? It's it's interesting how many people would relate to that. And if we don't make the time to take care of ourselves, our body will force us to make the time, and it's not always going to be at a convenient time. And so that's a tough lesson to learn, right? But if I could just recap what I heard you say, is that we know ourselves best, right? We know our bodies best, we know our needs best, but only, I think, if we take the time and make the effort to actually listen to ourselves instead of ignore ourselves, right? And I think our body will give us cues, right? So in your case, it was, of course, very extreme, to the point that you said you couldn't breathe properly, and you just completely were maybe falling apart physically. But I think maybe you can share, if you would to trace back a little bit before then, were you having any other cues that maybe you could have listened to a little bit earlier, or?
Oh, of course, of course. So for example, I would wake up during the night very sweaty, covered in sweat, and the doctors would be like, oh, well, maybe you're getting into very early perimenopause. At the same time, I used to get bruised very easily, and then I had anemia, and it's like, oh, you're a woman, you should take supplements or whatever. So there was a string of little things that I ignored for a long time, but when you see them in hindsight, like, oh, that's what it is. It's Hodgkin's. And I think, maybe cancer is a bit of an extreme, but sometimes, I don't know if it happened to you, but I used to work very long hours, like really long, brutal, a lot of pressure. And the first day I would go on vacation, I would be sick for the first 2-3 days. And it's like the body is not on adrenaline anymore, and the body is not on cortisols anymore. And there was like, oh, so now I'm not in defense anymore. I can let go and I can let all of that come out. And I think, it's so sad for me that the most precious vehicle we have on earth, which are our bodies, it's the gift, are the ones we neglect, we badly treat, we hate sometimes, and we just neglect the rest of the time because, hey, there are other people to take care of, or other things to do. And in reality, the body knows best. And I'm not saying you need to ignore what's in your head. I'm absolutely not. It's almost quite the opposite. You need to listen to yourself as well, and to listen to the voice of reason as well. But sometimes when the body doesn't do that, it's not a kid having a tantrum. It's not there to work against you. It's there actually to tell you, work with me, because I'm going to say almost like how your soul expresses itself, or brings itself to your attention. Work with me, do something about it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I absolutely have had that experience. For me, it was mainly present during university when I was studying for exams. It was without fail. Well, as a side note, I always worked. I think at that time when I was doing my undergraduate degree, I worked about 65 hours a week. Plus I was in school full time. So it's a recipe for yeah, that's right.
Sleep 2 hours, 15-minute shower.
That's exactly right. Yeah. 15-minute was a luxury. But what would happen, I noticed this, was every single time I had exams, which of course maybe my body was sort of used to the regular stress of work and classes, but then there's the added stress of extra studying and less sleep and probably worse nutrition around the time of exams. The first day after I was done my exams, I would be sick, like full blown. And actually, hopefully this isn't too much of an overshare, but from a stress and hormone perspective, because they're very much interrelated, I actually also noticed that not only would I get sick, but my menstrual cycle would actually be off, and it wouldn't actually start until I had that day of rest finally, right? Because my body was basically like, I don't have time for this either, because obviously we're in some kind of a battle here that's never ending. And so it's not until we have that day of rest that your body kind of self-regulates, and it needs that rest and recovery. And so unfortunately, it took several years of those cycles for me to start to recognize what those signs were earlier on, so that I could try to prevent this. So for me, I learned that I actually get, if I'm under too much stress and I haven't slept enough, typically is what it is, I actually get like a low-grade fever. And I know now that means, I tried this actually in my master's degree, that instead of staying up super late and having even less sleep and more stress and trying to cram the night before, I'm just going to go to sleep and see what happens. And it was better. I didn't get sick. It was like some kind of miracle where if you listen to your body, you're actually you're going to be good. So I definitely had that experience as well. But I wanted to go back to just the experience of, or these thoughts that we have of having to push ourselves and, working these crazy long hours. And, I think sometimes we do it at the start anyway, because maybe we like what we're doing. But I think there's also a little bit maybe of a corporate culture. And please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I think there is a corporate culture around that type of lifestyle and expectations that that's the way it's going to be in certain industries. I myself noticed this when I changed careers from working in health and fitness to business and finance. And when I first switched over, I really noticed that people were bragging about how little they took care of themselves. It was like a badge of honor that they didn't sleep. They haven't seen their family in weeks or months or whatever. They were living off of Red Bulls and coffee. They can't remember the last time they drank water. And I'm like, coming from health and fitness, where I'm telling all my clients to do the exact opposite, I'm thinking like, how are you proud of this, right? And so I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about, it's a really big question, but do you think there's something we can do to change that? Or should we just learn to manage it for ourselves? Like, it's such a hard thing to say, no, I'm not going to work 100 hours this week. I'm going to take care of myself instead. Like, how do you think we could manage that?
We can do both. I think that it's very difficult to change a culture that has been there for many years. And especially when we go into times of recession where, the fear of being laid off, the fear of competition, and there's a lot of competition now. It's like the big competition is global. There's AI. We need to, keep jobs longer because we're going to live longer as well. Mm-hmm. So there's this pressure that we need to be able to stay the distance and keep the distance, stay the distance, and also stay competitive. So we're caught in between this, like, how do I stay on point and productive, and at the same time, how do I keep myself from falling apart? How do I make sure I don't burn out mentally and physically? So I think that at least this is the work that I do. I'm not saying it's the truth, and I know other people will think differently, and I'm all fine with it. But I think that it's really finding a balance between the two, where in one way you prime your body to be able to function and give you 60 hours of focus, and at the same time you find tools, you find strategies to be able to cope as well, and also to have a nice life. So for me, it's the integration of both. I will give you examples because right now I'm very very theoretical, but for me, for example, and it's the case mostly for women, because I find that men, because of their hormonal system, are better at weathering stress over a long period, and then it stops, and then they come back and be stressed and high performer. And whereas women, we tend to be extremely cyclical. Even during any given day, there are times where we're going to be a bit more energized, and times whereas like, no, I can't do. And we need to honor that. And the corporate culture does not allow this to happen. So we need to find ways where we're honoring our bodies as well. So strategies is find what energizes you, take smaller breaks. I find that for most people, what makes them really happy is the human connection. So find allies at work, find people you can go and chit chat about whatever you want to chit chat about. Mentor other people, find things where you're still at the job, because a lot of these jobs as well, it's all about FaceTime.
Right.
Let's be serious. I don't think I don't think that a lot of the things that you're supposedly doing in 12 hours a day, quite honestly, you can do them in by far less. But if you do them by far less, then you will have more work. And that's why also we limit our potential in these places, because they don't allow you to they exploit you basically. So I think it's really about these two. I would also say is that it really depends on the teams where you work. I was very lucky because in my team, but at least for me, I asked to have a bit more flexibility because I worked with Asia. And so it meant working very early in the morning, 4 a.m., and very late at night, 9 p.m. So way before COVID, I was able to work at home. And I negotiated that with my team because, like noon on Fridays, everybody's home. So noon Eastern time, so I would go home. So there are ways to work around this, because unfortunately at this moment, I don't see how things are going to change, especially in these like finance, which are very old institutions. They're very rigid. They have this tendency to want to automize. Human resources are non-human and absolutely not resources. They're more commodities. So I think it's more about taking care of yourself by yourself. FaceTime still matters in these places for a lot of people that I know I work with. The career is very important, and that is also part of their self-care and self-love, is to be promoted, to feel achieved. So finding ways where you can honor your body, you can honor your energetic system, and at the same time working for your future is probably a better way to go than quitting if you don't have anything. Well, I did it. It's not always a good strategy. But I literally at that point, I got to the point where I was literally cannot take it anymore. Or being too compliant in a way, and forgetting that you're not a machine. You're also a human body who needs nurturing, who needs also something outside the career, outside work. And could be friendships at the workplace, it could be friendships or family outside, but finding ways where you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And then you realize, oh no, I need to change job. Like I'm again talking about me for a second. It's like the day you lose your identity, like your job title, who are you? And for me, it was like I still continue saying I'm an ex-Wall Streeter. It's easier for my job, but at the end of the day, it's very pleasing. The career identity, the work identity is very pleasing, and we tend to attach a lot of expectations onto it, because who would I be if I'm not, I don't know, whoever my job title is. I don't know. And that is also part of also taking care of yourself, taking care of your energetic systems, is finding ways where you're not attaching everything, your right to exist in a way, to how much you produce, because you're not a machine, you're not a factory. But finding other ways where you feel achieved, where you feel satisfied, where you feel you make an impact, without it necessarily being attached to a number of hours that you have spent. And let's stop glorifying things. I do remember when we arrived here in the US from London, but mostly from France, people were like, what are you doing this weekend? When I had a weekend, very unusual times to have a weekend. It's like, well, I'm doing nothing. Like, what? You don't do anything? No. Well, you guys, like, don't you guys just want to sit and have a meal and have a chat? And nope, there's always like sports and those. I'm like, whoa, that is way too much noise for me. But this is also, I think, I am so. Please stop me if if I talk so much as well. I think there is something else that I feel we're lacking as well here is being okay with the discomfort of silence and being okay with sitting and doing nothing, like literally nothing. And we are so scared. It's almost like a little death that we expect. What's happening? There is no noise. There's nothing happening. But sitting there with in that moment, it could be meditation, it could be just staring at the wall, or, you know, if you have pets, they do this all the time. And it's just sitting there and just like, okay, so I'm going to sit there for 3-5 minutes, maybe, I don't know, contemplating a flower or something. Let's see what happens. But it's very scary. It's very scary.
It is scary, but I think that I experienced this, that resonates with me a lot, because I experienced this on sort of a macro scale where I mean, maybe I stopped here and there during the day briefly, but I didn't really stop and think about my life until I had already gone through 3 degrees, a career change. And I don't even if I think back, I don't actually remember ever fully making that decision for myself. I mean, obviously I made the decision because I was the one that went and did it all and applied and, interviewed and everything. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't remember sitting in that silence and actually listening to myself, because I think it is about having the discomfort of the silence. But I think another element that's important to that is how long are you sitting in that silence? Because there's a threshold that you have to pass, I think, before you actually get value from the silence, right? Because the first little while, you're just still bombarded maybe with thoughts from the day or the week or whatever. And then once you get past all that, then you start to have your own thoughts about, you can actually notice the flower, or you can think about how you're feeling and connect a little bit with yourself. As an example, people may think this is strange, but earlier this month, I took a week off, and it's actually so funny that you said that about the weekends. When people say, what do you mean you did nothing? Because I said I took a week off, and they said, oh, well, where'd you go? What'd you do? And I said, absolutely nothing. And that's weird for 2 reasons. One, because nobody does nothing on purpose, and they certainly don't use their precious vacation days to do nothing. And also, the people asking me know me, and they know that I have never done nothing. But it was such an interesting experience, because I remember on the first and even second day, like, it took 2 full days of silence. And actually, I should say, for context, I also did a full digital detox. So no social media, not even texting, regular, like, basically my phone was just off, no Netflix even. I barely listened to music. I eventually started listening to some music, instrumental music, but I didn't want the influence of lyrics or someone, like, because they're all inputs of energy and messages and things that we don't realize day to day, but it creates a lot of noise. And I have to tell you that the first couple of days were so uncomfortable. I didn't know what to do with myself. I also didn't realize how much time we actually have in an entire day when we're not consumed by doing these other things. But then after that, it was really transformational for me to just be with my thoughts. I listened to my body. I slept more. I had happier thoughts. I actually ate less, and I ate better things. Like, it was just a very cool experience. I had these realizations, like, not big epiphanies of any kind, but just, I was just able to actually connect with myself and listen to myself a little bit. So there definitely is something to that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that part of it. I don't know if you think that's weird, but anybody that knows.
No, I think it's very courageous because I think, again, we are primed to do something. You have to do something. If you don't do, like as you said, you don't do it, you're weird. But when you think about it, again, I'm going to talk about pets because I think they're our big teachers. If you had a cat, dogs are a bit more, but if you had a bit more active, but if you had even a dog, if you had a cat, they sit there, they sleep all day, they do three, four things. Of course, they get very active during the night, but we're not going to go there. But even with a dog, they're happy. You throw a ball, they bring it back, throw a ball, they bring it back, and that's about it. And I think we really, really forget how much we live on autopilot. And you said, you made choices, but it's not really choices because you made them and I made them. And a lot of us continue making choices from a completely unconscious place where we do think habit. It's a habit. The habit to take the subway every morning, the habit to get to the office, to take your coffee, to go and to do your emails when you wake up. It's a habit. And once you create this kind of like buffer as a detox time that you just did, you're breaking these habits. And of course, it's uncomfortable. It's like you've been doing this for a long time, and all of a sudden you pattern interrupt. It's like, what is going on here? It's like it's panicky inside. I don't know what to do with myself. And then you realize, well, that is your real self, actually. And it's all the rest that is madness. And unfortunately, what happens quite often is that as soon as you go back to that same state of before, you're going to have the same habits because this is the known, this is the certainty, this keeps you safe. This is the part of us that likes to control what we do. And we want to, having the bad thoughts, that's control. Drinking too much coffee when we don't need it, that's control. But at the same time, I'm going to tell you, we're all human and we all do what we can. But also, I think that if we allowed ourselves, I'm not necessarily saying, everybody should go meditate because we don't necessarily give ourselves the luxury to have that. But sometimes if we go in increments, like 3 times a day, before lunch, go and take a walk with only instrumental music in your ears, go into a nearby park, sit down for 1 minute, buy your food or bring your food to work, and just go to work. And when you are eating, please, North American people, when you are eating, the food is your partner, not your computer, on the phone. Yeah. It's one of those things that I never allowed myself to stray from because I wanted the food to be honored. And you realize very quickly that things taste better when you give them the attention, like a lot of things. You realize that you're calm, you feel that you have a real life, that you don't spend your life at work, even if some of my colleagues would sleep at work as well at some, you do this in finance, but you kind of have a life with a bit of joy. And going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think one of the issues of making all of these choices on autopilot and completely unconsciously is that we don't give ourselves permission to feel joy and any kind of pleasure or joyful actions, or whether it's food or interactions or people or whatever, anything that can make us feel joyful and playful. We feel bad about it because it's a waste of time. So maybe as well introducing a bit more of this pleasure, of this joie de vivre in what we do every day, even at the job. And sometimes it could be something as simple as having green tea or having a discussion. Sometimes it's just going online and reading a stupid article or watching cats TV. I don't know. There are so many things we can do every day because at the end of the day, we all need a job and we all need to bring money home and pay mortgages and rents and what have you. What can we do until we have another choice to make this choice work for us? So we start by working for ourselves. We don't work for a company. We don't work for a boss. We don't even work for a salary or paycheck. We work for ourselves. And once you flip this kind of script, then the choices you're going to make will be a bit more conscious, because should I really have 2 packs of cigarettes a day to be able to go through my day? I worked with people who wanted really to stop smoking, and at that time I used to do hypnosis on them, and it wouldn't work. And I was like, but I know hypnosis takes time, but I know it does work. What's going on? Until I discovered that actually the reason why it didn't work, it was because that was the only permission they gave themselves to step away from the desk and have a break. Because nobody's going to say, no, you can't smoke. Like, what do you, hey, it's an addiction, so I have to.
Yes.
Let's give ourselves permission to be human and to have a fun, playful, joyful life. As you said, there will be a lot of lemons along the road. But before we get to lemons, maybe there are strawberries and peaches and apricots and I don't know, a lot of fun stuff. Maybe fruits you've never seen before. Who knows?
Absolutely. No, and I think an important thing to remember is that I believe that to experience joy, you have to be present. You can't do something on the side while you're doing something else and truly experience the joy of that thing. I think what you were kind of getting at. And just along the lines of giving yourself permission to do those things, whether it's little things that bring you joy, or whether we go back to what we were saying about taking proper care of ourselves. You said something earlier about, 2 things that I wanted to kind of tie together. One, you talked about fueling your energetic system, or finding ways to re-energize yourself, whether it's just during the day, if you have patterns of ups and downs, or just in general. And then you also said something about how we tie our value to how much we produce. And I think as soon as you said that, I had a thought that, well, can't you actually produce more if you actually take care of yourself? Like, wouldn't it's a little counterintuitive, right? Like, who's to say I have to burn out to be maximally productive, right? And so this is where I think we can change our mindset a little bit about, well, what is actually going to get me objectively closer to producing more? Even if I do tie my value to that, taking care of myself is actually a great way for me to be able to produce more at work, but also have a more fulfilling type of life in general. Yeah. And so I know that one thing that you talk about a lot, and we spoke about this a bit last time, and I loved where the conversation was going, is talking about finding your purpose, or you help people find their purpose and find fulfillment. So I just really wanted to ask you, what does finding your purpose mean to you? Because I will admit that I am guilty, which I'm sure other people are too, of hearing this word, find your purpose, and thinking that it's some big, huge thing. I don't know where to start. It's like a Mount Everest that I'm never going to be able to climb, and it's just out of reach. So I see you smiling. So what can you say about that?
I have a lot to say about that, because like you, some time ago for me, it's like, I don't have a purpose in life, and I'm going to die, and I wouldn't have made any impact, and blah, blah, blah. And then you start doing a bit of work, self-work, personal development, spirituality, and all of different things. And then you find different ways. And then comes a time, it's like, okay, 1 second here. What is the purpose of living? And when we discussed last time, as I mentioned, for me, the first purpose we have is to stay alive. So what can you do to stay alive? If you are not able to keep yourself alive, then there's no point looking for a purpose, because it's obvious. So purpose number 1 is find ways where you're not only surviving every day, but also finding ways to live a better life. So that's a very kind of like worldly, down to earth purpose. And then there comes the more, I would say, human, spiritual, soul-based purpose. And this is when we think again that we're going to be like Jesus or a prophet, and I mean, they had their own purpose, good for them. um, but obviously on our scale, it's a tall order. And what I don't want people is to think that because you don't have this grandiloquent purpose, you're worthless. Is absolutely not the case. Your purpose is what makes you feel happy, what makes you feel impactful. If we go back to earlier, you don't work for anyone, you work for yourself. Then the purpose is also finding what works for yourself. So we all come with a lot of wounds. We had a lot of upsets in our lives. So purpose number one is, how can I be a better person where I'm a bit less judgmental and a bit less reactive and a bit less, we all have our own shadows. And how can I heal that? That is a purpose. And once you have healed that, you learn a lot about yourself. And all of a sudden, you find yourself on podcasts like you or me, sharing these learnings. That's purpose number two. And you realize that this conversation that you had with someone, maybe on the subway, and you saw someone, it's like, oh, I really like your shoes. And all of a sudden, this person has a huge smile, which on the subway really does not happen often. And that is purpose number three. Maybe you made an impact that day. And by playing that little game with yourself, you realize, actually, I am much more impactful than I thought I was, because acts of kindness, I'm not saying be nice. It's not about being nice. It's really about being kind. It's someone being kind is sometimes being kind can also mean being harsh with someone, telling them the truth. Some people that you love, sometimes when you see them self-sabotaging, being kind is telling them, I love you. And I know when it starts like this, it's never very pleasant, but there's a reason. But that's how you make an impact. And so I would encourage every one of us to find the ways, number one, where we self-sabotage, so that we come from a place where we're a bit more honest about ourselves. Number two, what makes us happy, what makes us joyful, what makes us playful. And number three, what makes us impactful and how we make an impact. And when you start saying that you're by far less upset about certain things, or you feel when you're going triggered, okay, that is fine. I don't need to do this. It's about me. It's not about this person. Number two, I actually really enjoy working with people. I actually enjoy talking with people. That's purpose number two. And number three, sharing what I have learned is my way as well of being impactful. And this is a purpose too. One of the things that I really insist upon is to know your values. And once you know your values, then all of a sudden, you know your anti-values, and you know what triggers you. You know your non-negotiables. But also, when you know your values, you are really a one step or two steps closer to find your purpose, actually, because you know what makes your soul sing. You know what makes you motivated in a good way. When you work in a lot of these corporates, especially in finance, motivation is the fear of being laid off, because it happens in 2 seconds, and the motivation of earning a bonus. So you spend your life in these two cycles of, I'm going to be fired or laid off, what will happen to me? And then you work to get a bonus. And it's very Pavlovian, and it's not a very interesting way of living life. But when you start going into what is important for you, and why do I work in finance? Maybe you work in finance because you enjoy the money, and it's perfectly okay to enjoy the money because you like going to fine restaurants. That makes you joyful. And so all of a sudden, what you're doing gives you purpose. I can tell you one thing. A lot of the people that I worked with were involved in charities when I was in finance. And it wasn't, so there are a lot of unsavory characters, but many of the people that I was lucky to interact with were involved in charities. And they weren't involved in charities because it looks good on their resume. They were literally people who lost loved ones to cancer, to other diseases, to MS, And it was very important for them to bring awareness. And because they were earning a bit of money, they were able to do that. So that as well is a purpose. So we don't have one purpose, we have a lot of purposes. They change all the time. Your values will change as well over time. They'll probably be a bit different. And you will see when you start looking at your values, looking at what triggers you, looking at what you enjoy doing, then you're very close to be there. But if you want to be Jesus, you can be Jesus too. But I think it's a tall order, though. Not for me.
Yeah. No, I love so much of what you said, especially even what you just said right now about having multiple purposes. I've never heard anybody say that before, because, and I think that's part of the problem. Like, why do we have to, the fact that we think we only have one purpose, it's like, if we don't find that one thing, it's over. It's just inherently an all or nothing way to think about it. And so I love the idea of having multiple purposes. And I also love that the examples you gave where we may feel that fulfillment in small ways, most of them, I think, had nothing to do with our jobs. And so, smiling at somebody on the subway or complimenting somebody, right, and making them smile, little things like this. I think that's a great way to approach it, because even if we hated our jobs, we could still find purpose in life, right? Because there's more to life than just the job. And I also love what you said about your values and your anti-values. I've never heard that before either. And that's great. I love that. I went through an exercise where I wrote down my values a couple of years ago, which is embarrassing. I should probably revisit it because they do change over time. But I think it would be so great to also write down what the anti-value would be that's associated with each of those things, because I think it helps set a boundary in my case, in written format that basically says, here are the things that I want to align with, and here are, more importantly, the things I don't want to align with. Because when you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else always, right? Just like when you say yes to extra hours at work, you're maybe saying no to taking care of yourself. So there's always kind of duality, right? And and even what you said about kindness and how sometimes that means being harsh, I reminded me of an article I read once where it talked about people who avoid conflict, especially one-on-one conflict. And the reason that they gave was because they said, well, I don't want to approach this person with this negative, like this criticism or this negative feedback, because I want to protect them. And I've heard that so many times before, but the article actually said that that's kind of BS. They called BS on it because they said, actually, the only person you're protecting is yourself, because you don't want to feel uncomfortable. When you could actually be helping that person, right? If you were to raise it. So, I thank you for sharing all of that. It's given me actually a lot to think about as well. And the one last thing that I'll comment on that you shared is, or the takeaway that I have is, especially in investment banking, I think that's like maybe the epitome of the finance.
Yes.
Maybe has a little bit more of the toxicity, unhealthy lifestyle, just basically from what I've heard in my life. And what I love is that you basically said that we can be bankers, we can have that side to us, but we can also at the same time be spiritual and find fulfillment and find purpose in these other parts of our life. Like, I really don't think, whether it's, charities or, like you said, fine dining or whatever it is, theater, like whatever your thing is, I think people need to be reminded or remind themselves of the other pieces of the pie that make up who they are. Because even just reminding yourself that you like those things can take a little bit of load off of what constitutes your identity, right? And it helped me be detached just a little bit, not to say that you're no longer associated with your job, because you are, but there's more to it than that. And for me, I feel like a weight is lifted off my shoulders just thinking about it, because we are a whole person, right? Beyond just the stresses and the pressures of work and our careers. So as you can see, I've taken a lot away from what you said.
And you're the same person. There's your behavior will change, but you are the same person. And if you think that, when you talk about people who hate their jobs, I just want to say, maybe certain tasks are not fulfilling. Maybe there's something you can do about that. But what matters is you hate your job, but find ways, not necessarily to love it, but find ways to challenge yourself in this job. And whether it's taking courses online or whether it's talking with other people, find something. I'm not saying stay stuck, absolutely not, but find something that helps the soul inside of you to feel alive. So you're not dead at the desk, you're not dead inside. And again, we're all the spirits having a human experience, and the job is part of the experience, and it's all about what we do with it. And not everybody has the privilege of just saying I quit and I'll find another job. But as you said, find what makes you feel alive. Find what makes you feel joyful. What we don't want on earth is more grumpy people to go to the workplace, especially when these people have a power of decision. And it's a privilege to have this. Even, when we are not CEOs or whatever, we still have the power of making somebody's mood better that day. This is a huge responsibility when you have a team and you're in a bad mood and everybody's in a bad mood. So I would say let's go back to who we are as individuals, and let's focus on who we want to be as individuals. And then again, your values is what is important for me today? What do I want to feel today? How do I want to be today? And whether you're at a bad job, if you're in a toxic environment, you really need to leave because this is really not healthy. But for most people who are in an okay place, what can I do to make my day better? Sometimes it's bringing a bowl of chocolates and put it on your desk, and you will see you will become very popular and have a lot of conversations. It's little things. They don't necessarily, not going to change entirely your life, but they are going to change the way you see others and you see your life, and make you maybe also give you this little impulse, like, I'm important, I'm a nice person, I'm a decent human, and I'm happy with being me.
Yes. And I think I had another realization just right now, that maybe it's not even about doing the perfect thing, but it's just about doing something where it helps you feel like you're taking control of your life in some small way, right? So maybe even if that means you're just putting out a bowl of chocolates on your desk, you made that choice and you decided to do a little thing that will probably brighten someone's day. And that can almost compound a little bit too, and give us the confidence to maybe try additional things or just feel generally better. And so when we have a happier disposition, typically people want to interact with us more, and it kind of all comes together quite nicely. And so for anybody listening who maybe feels like they're not the happiest at work, or they haven't found one of their purposes, I'm going to start putting it that way. I'm never going to say find your purpose anymore, because there's more than one, I've learned. Try something like that. Try something outside of work, engage in some new activities or take initiative in some way, because I don't think there's anything to lose, really. Like if you are feeling unhappy or unfulfilled, I don't think it could get any worse by trying these little things, right? So
it makes you feel alive. It makes you feel as you said, you're in control, and it gives you back as well, some say in your destiny as well. And I'm going to tell you another thing is that even if it doesn't work, you tried. It's probably you learned something, you met someone, you experienced something that you haven't experienced before. When we go outside this routine, these habits, this comfort zone, it's a bit uncomfortable, but boy, don't we feel alive after that? It's like, wow.
Yeah, it gets us out of that routine, right? It gets us out of the routine, that kind of make us feel stuck, contribute to us feeling stuck. So
that's how we get old. It's when we do the same things and we don't try anything new, because it's like, well, I've done that. Well, you can do it more, you can do it differently, you can whatever. It's exciting.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, Mayda, I have to say, I thought we were maybe like 15, 20 minutes in, but we are absolutely not 15 or 20 minutes. It's such a joy always to talk to you. I feel like we could chat forever, but I wanted to make sure before we wrap up for today that I ask, where can people go to learn more about you, follow your work, check out all the awesome things that you're doing? Where can we go to keep track of what you're doing?
Thank you. Yes, first on my website, maydapoccoaching.com, and also on LinkedIn, Mayda Poc, and on Instagram, Mayda Poc, and YouTube as well, but Instagram and LinkedIn are better.
Okay. I'll be sure to include the links so that you're a little bit easier to find. Make sure that we got the spelling right and everything like that. So with that, thank you so much again, Mayda, for joining me. Thank you for all of your wisdom and just your energy, your positivity. It's contagious. I have to admit, I was feeling a little bit tired today, but all of a sudden I'm re-energized. So thank you for being that thing that's going to keep me going for the rest of the evening. On that note, I also always like to thank our listeners for their time and their attention. And please make sure to check out Mayda's links, and also make sure you subscribe to Mindset Over Matter so we can meet again on our next episode. Thank you so much again, Mayda. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.